Welcome to the second master session of Lead to Close series, and today I'm very proud to bring you Caryn Kopp, who, as you discover, knows more than anyone about lead identification, analysis, and opening doors. Finding lead is the core problem that B2B sales faces. We know that there is no silver bullet, yet we continue down the path of spray and pray in various forms. We wanted to dive in and share with our sales community, discuss questions and issues we face, and do that by bringing in experts in open, intimate settings, as well as sessions like this one. Caryn is the chief door opener at Kopp Consulting, whose door opener service has helped thousands secure initial meetings at the executive level in almost every major company. Caryn Kopp has been dubbed the chief door opener because she gets her clients in the door with their prospects. Caryn's senior business developers, known as Kopp door openers, find the right opportunities and secure initial meetings for their clients. A best-selling author, internationally recognized speaker, and an expert in business development, Caryn can be seen in Inc., Fortune magazine, Forbes, and Newsweek. She's a faculty member of Vern Harnish's Gazelle Growth Institute and is the sales messaging coach for scaling up coaches worldwide. She co-authored BizDev Done Right and wrote The Path to Cash, the words you need to bypass those darn prospect objections. Meet Caryn Kopp. Caryn, welcome to this session of Lead to Close. I just want to talk a bit about why we are talking about this, because I think when we look at the conversion rate in B2B sales, which is depending upon who you're looking at between Forrester and McKinsey and Gartner, it's anything between 1.8% and to a low single digit, which means every 100 leads that we are trying to engage with, we are converting between 2 and 5. Which is not a great success rate, and something is wrong. And what I feel from talking to a lot of experts like you is that we are getting it wrong right at the top of the funnel. We are either not opening the right doors, or we are not pursuing the right prospects, or we are getting in too late where we become, as they say, column fodder. They already know who they're going to buy from. They get us in because they need to sort of put in like 3 quotations or 5 quotations and so on and so forth. And you have been exceptionally successful in opening doors. I mean, I don't even want to say about your nickname. So that's one thing you must say. But I really want to know, where is this going wrong?
Well, that's a loaded question. There's probably 7 questions as part of that question, but I think I'll start out with reacting to the statistic, because I think the measurement of the statistic is wrong, and it is leading us to wrong conclusions about the engagement of buyers. If you were to take the numerator and the denominator that they use to come up with this statistic, and you remove all the people, all the sellers who aren't doing this right, which goes to a lot of the things you said after you quoted the statistic. If you remove all of the people who weren't doing this right and all of their results from the measurement, the engagement would be significantly higher. It is possible to get in the door with people that you don't know who are at the executive level. We've been doing this for 24 years at Kopp Consulting. If we weren't doing this right and we weren't getting these kinds of results, we wouldn't even be here at this point, right? Across industries, if you do this right, people will engage at the executive level because it's important to them to engage. It's really all about them. Why should they engage? If they have a need, they have a vendor or they have a solution, and it's probably working fairly well. They probably know 3 other companies who do what the seller does, and one of them may be their cousin Vinny. So why should that person engage anyway? And so part of that has to do with the targeting. Part of that has to do with the sales language, sales messaging, not the marketing messaging that people use. And then it's the tactics and the techniques, which, yes, can be about tactics and techniques, but much of it has to do with the person who's doing the work, himself or herself. So if you remove everybody who isn't doing it right, and you only measure the people who are doing it right, all those statistics change.
Yeah, I would agree with you. My only submission in that line of thinking is that too many people are getting it wrong.
Oh,
And
yes,
right.
that's
So
true.
so you cannot possibly look at the successes which where people are doing it right, and obviously their statistics are significantly different, and I believe that, and I am not for a moment will I contest that, because I know about it, right? I know what you're saying, but my sort of question to you is, as someone who knows this so well, like we discussed many times, it's a training problem. It's a, like you said, technique problem, learning problem. So all of that is part of what's wrong with the salesperson who is doing this wrong, and what's wrong with the leadership which is allowing them to do it wrong. So my question, before we move on to actual how you go and do it, where do you stand there? I mean, is it do you see it's a problem with the sales leadership, with legacy thinking, people who are not taking into account that possibly the buyer and the way they buy has changed in the last 10 years?
All of the above.
Hmm.
Leadership loves to blame this on the salespeople, and it's not often the salesperson's fault, right? Because if the salesperson is not doing what he or she is supposed to do, it's likely that that person was never the right person for that job in the first place. And leadership was the one who made that decision and put the wrong person in that seat. There's one of the things I talk about in my book, Biz Dev Done Right, is that people know hunters and farmers. Everybody knows the difference between the hunters and the farmers. The farmers grow the business and the hunters find the business. But what most don't know, especially leadership, and it's in a blind spot for them, because if they knew it, they wouldn't do it this way, is that in the world of hunters, there are different kinds of hunters. Some are great at having the meeting, building the relationship to close the sale. We call them the closers. And others are intuitively great. They've got it in their DNA to open the doors, even with senior level decision makers, with people they don't know. And they don't need to be at a conference or a trade show or an in-person networking event to do it. They can just get this job done. We call them the openers. There are very few openers out there who can and will do this job. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people in the closer category of hunters who haven't been successful. They have. They've been successful, but it's not what they love to do. In their DNA, it's not, they don't sit down and say, I get to make phone calls today. They say, oh, I have to make phone calls today, right? And it drains their energy. So when we're doing our work at Kopp Consulting with the door opener service, we only hire hunters who are openers, and they don't need to be at these in-person events to meet the right people. They enjoy this part of the process. They can and will do this job. It's rare in my experience to find one seller who's equally great at both opening and closing in the world of hunters. Usually it's more skewed one to the other. So leadership, because this is in a blind spot, if they go out looking for a hunter because they feel a hunter is a hunter is a hunter, or they'll stand on ceremony that one person should do both sides of these jobs, even though they might readily admit that they're not typically good at both sides of this job, they will hire for that person and hope that it works out. But we all know what happens. It'll take 3 to 6 months for the leader to realize this person never really was good at opening the doors, or even if they were wanted to do that part of the job in the first place, but leadership put them in that position. The other part of leadership, actually, there's 2 more parts that I'll talk about. The second part of leadership is most of them don't know how to do this job, this particular job. And so not only is it difficult for them to hire the right person, but onboarding this person is often, oh, listen to so-and-so making some phone calls. But that's not really onboarding. It's not providing them a targeted list. that is already vetted, and sales messaging with answers for objections that they know works, and then having that seller demonstrate proficiency before practicing basically on the important prospects, right? So they also, from a leadership perspective, don't know when something's going wrong. They don't know how to diagnose it because they don't know how to set up this part of the process. And so they might want to reach out to people like us to help them to figure out how do they set this up properly from the beginning so that their salespeople can be successful and they can identify if their salespeople are on the wrong track, which they typically can't until it's too late. And then they just fire the salesperson. The last part that's really important from a management perspective, but it's also important for the salespeople who are listening to this to know, is that leaders are notoriously terrible about leaving the salespeople to do the work of sales. They'll ask them to spend 3 hours once a month, once a week, to generate reports for leadership, all the while taking them off the phones and away from the sales activity and in a completely different headspace and rhythm that's required for the success of this job. And that's the fault of leadership. Isn't there someone else who could put together that report? Right? You really want to take your best seller off the phones to generate a report or to train another salesperson who may be having some trouble. Leave that person to do what that person does best and watch the results soar. So I'll just stop there after throwing all of that over the fence.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it, and I have a lot of questions, but for instance, one of the things that we do is put the newest member of the team who is called a SDR or a BDR, whatever you call them, to make calls to the senior most executives and expect that they can hold a conversation. I think it's fundamentally flawed, that whole idea.
It is,
right?
Yes.
So
it's flawed.
Yeah, so I'll not go into that direction because that will take us into a different discussion, and I would love to do that as I may, but I would come back to your core expertise. How do you actually generate leads that will convert?
Right. So I talk about the 5 planks of door opening success. If a company or a seller is not getting in as many of the right doors as they think they should, there's a problem in one or more of 5 key planks. Every one of these planks has to be in place and working properly in order for the right doors to open consistently. The first one is target. And you started talking about that at the top of our conversation. Target is so important because if you nail target, the rest of sales is significantly easier. And it used to be 15 years ago that you can target based on size of company, level of decision maker, geography, industry niche, and all those other easy things to put into Zoom info and spit out a big prospect list, right? But not anymore. Even before the pandemic, but especially since the pandemic, it's important to add 3 additional filters when it comes to target, which we do with our clients when we're starting a door opener program. So we always start with the strategy of the approach, who we're going to target. And the 3 additional points are obvious solution. For which group of prospects are you the obvious solution? As soon as they know you exist, they wouldn't take a step without having you as part of their decision set. And I really love a small subsection of obvious solution, which is only solution, because there's usually a group in there that will find you to be the only solution. And when I say that, people say to me, Caryn, there's only a couple that would find me to be the only solution. And then I say, okay, fine, but are they your clients? Oh, and they rise to the top of the priority list, right? So obvious solution, who will also willingly pay what you want to charge for your products and services. Not everybody who should buy on value will buy on value. So what if you were to just stop talking to the people who would never believe in value and focus your time on the people who would value? And there are ways you can research those people ahead of time. And then urgency, that's the third area. Who will feel urgency and for what reason for taking a meeting with you sooner rather than later? Why would that person not hold off? Now, 15 years ago, we could say to prospects, to be a resource, we'll be a resource for you, even if you have another, but that doesn't work anymore. It's not enough of a reason for somebody who's doing the job of 3 people to give up their time to learn about something new. You must say something more specific, and they must be in a category of prospects that is going through something specific. So what is it about what you do that would create urgency? So if you could add in those factors along with size of company, level of decision maker, geography, and all those other good things, then you have a more narrow group of prospects who's going to meet with you sooner and take next steps sooner. Once you identify who those people are, and then you create a list of who those people are, whether you know them or you don't, who are the exact right people to initiate that conversation, then that's the first plank, is target. The next one is the right message. What is it that you're going to say to these people when you call them, when you send them an email, but not a marketing email, a relationship building sales email, one-to-one, or you send them a one-to-one LinkedIn? What is it that you're going to say that will help that person understand why meeting you is going to be the best decision they make this week? We have 2 trademarks in sales language. It's a foundational component. So you first have to know who you're talking to in order to know what to say. You don't want to go too wide in what you say, which is marketing language. You don't want to go too narrow because you could cause a disconnect. So it has to be somewhere that's just right for that group of people. The third plank is the answers for objections. When you reach these people and you say what you're going to say, the majority of the objections should have already been addressed in the messaging and the targeting itself. That's a whole strategy piece that we do as well. But then they're going to have some objections, and you need to have a slam dunk answer for that. One that will help them move past the objection. So it's not just the answer for the objection, but plank 3 is the right answer for the objection. Plank 4 is the right person doing the work. So we already talked about that. Do you have a closer who's a hunter doing the work of the opener? If so, it's possible that's why the doors aren't opening. You may not have the right person doing the work. And the 5th plank is the right execution, which has to do with how much time someone's putting into this weekly. Usually people are not putting enough time into this weekly in order to make a difference. And so when they report to me, here's what I'm doing, I'll say to them, well, how much time are you spending? They'll say, oh, I put in about 2 hours a week. Well, that's not enough. It's not enough. Our programs are 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, or 40 hours a week, all against the right group of prospects, saying the right message with the right person doing the work, and then the right amount of time spent. The other part of execution is, what is it? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a LinkedIn? What do you say on the 3rd try, 5th try, 20th try that will make a difference and an impact with this prospect? They're not all going to answer the phone on the first try. That's unrealistic to expect that. But there's another thing that leadership sometimes does, is they don't allow the sales process to play out. So they'll say to their sellers, if you don't reach somebody after 4 tries, 5 tries, just give up. And the 4 or 5 tries may not have even been good ones, right? But even good tries sometimes need more time, and you can't say the same thing more than once. So you need the person doing the work who is looking at, okay, I already left this kind of message theme. I left that message theme. Now I'm going to do some additional research on the prospect, and I'm going to say something even more specific. I'm going to give them a short case study and leave that, send that, and then follow up to see if we could talk about how it applies to them. There are all these different ways to go about this. In fact, when we hire our new door openers, and we only hire experienced people. We don't hire anybody who's junior. And we then will put them through an onboarding process, which includes a now what exercise. So it's just a list. You haven't reached somebody after 3 or 4 tries. Now what? Didn't reach them. Now what? Didn't reach them. Now what? Didn't reach, and see the creativity that these people will have in order to reach the right person. So these are the 5 planks: right target, right sales message, right answers for objections, right door opener doing the work, right execution. When those 5 planks are in place, the doors open and they are meaningful meetings. When we make meetings for our clients, now that most of them are virtual, our door opener is on the meeting too, for a really nice, warm handoff. And our person is super senior, and we can help the seller structure a conversation that results in a second meeting. So I'm going to stop there and see what questions or where you want to take the conversation.
When you say that you actually try to continue to pursue someone beyond the 6th or 7th or 8th call, how often is that a productive process? I mean, I'm just trying to understand, how do you ensure that this is where efficiency will drop or effectivity will drop? This is where we draw the line. How do you think about that?
It will always be productive and effective as long as the person who is on the list meets all the criteria of the right target. The time when it's not effective is when you have a bunch of people on your prospect list who don't deserve to be there. And you may be leaving them messages, and the reason why they're not responding and you're not getting anywhere is because they're not the right prospect. But if you are sure that these people are as close to right as possible, then there's no reason to give up. No reason. You may drop your cadence over time because I call it the 3 Ps of prospect follow-up. You don't want to, it's persistence with patience without being a pest. You don't want to contact them too often to destroy the relationship. You don't want to contact them too seldom, which a lot of people do, so that they don't know who you are. There's a good balance. So over time, you may drop your cadence, but you keep them in rotation. Set Google alerts for the person, the company, the industry, so that when you realize that there's something else happening, you can reach out to them and say, here's this article, I thought of you, and nominate them for awards. They'll very much appreciate that. And then they're more likely to re-engage with you or to engage with you. But I'll share a personal story. In the beginning of time, I was the door opener. I was the first door opener here, and now we have over 30 door openers. And there was one time I was supporting a meeting planning company that targeted pharmaceutical companies, the big ones. And we were looking to get in at the executive level. And there was one person from a large pharmaceutical company located in New Jersey. So there's only a few of those. People can figure out probably which one it was. And I had been reaching out to that person for 2 years. Now, I'd spoken with her along the way. She was covered. And that interests me because I'm fascinated by that. What can I say differently? What can I do differently to get around that objection? But she was really covered, really covered. And so there was one day, 2 years into it, where I'd been contacting her periodically, and I got to her name on the list. And I looked at her and I thought to myself, I have to be crazy to continue reaching out to this person. I mean, at what point do you just give up? And I have found that the people who are most successful at this job are highly methodical. And I can tell you I'm a highly methodical person, and it pained me physically to skip over this woman. But I did think about it, but I really couldn't bring myself to skip over her. So I called her, and on that day she answered, and she said, Caryn, I'm really glad you called because things have changed and we're reevaluating all of our vendors, and I want to bring you in. So my client then got that meeting. My client got that business, and that was, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago. And my client is still the vendor there at this very large pharmaceutical company in New Jersey that has since acquired other pharmaceutical companies, and their business has just exploded as a result. If I didn't make that call that day, they never would have had that meeting. They wouldn't have been the vendor of choice. Millions and millions of dollars for that company hinged on the call that I made that day. And it would have been very simple for me to say, I'm nuts. I shouldn't make this call, but I did. When I tell that story to people, usually they say to me, oh yeah, there was this one prospect that I was pursuing for a long time, and finally 2 years later, they signed on. So why give up? As long as you know that the prospect meets all the right prospect criteria, it's really just a matter of time, but only if you hang in there. If I didn't hang in there, a competitor would have gotten that business.
This is very interesting. You know why this is so interesting. When you talk of opening doors, it's typically the expectation that we are going to make a sale this quarter, because everybody is driven by the quarterly targets, right? The quota.
Right.
And I mean, it's another topic of discussion. I can go in a lot of detail into this.
Oh, yes, me too.
Right? So what you're really saying is you take your target group, ensure that you have identified them right, and then nurture them as long as it takes before they buy from you, because they have to buy from you if you have done the targeting right.
Yes. And if the messaging is right,
Yeah.
right? Because people talk about, oh, I'm a trusted resource, I'm a trusted advisor. Really? If you only hang in there for 3 to 5 phone calls, voicemails, emails that might be kind of crappy emails anyway,
Yeah.
how much of a trusted resource are you, really? I've had clients who have told me initially that their sales cycle is 18 months. And then maybe 4 months into it, they've had meetings with exactly the right people. They have next steps, next meetings, proposals, and they'll say to me, where's my ROI? And I'll say to them, okay, so help me understand the math. You told me that 18 months is a typical sales cycle. We're 4 months into it. Why would you expect to have closed by now? Unless, of course, we trip over something. And, sure, people will trip over things. Absolutely. But why would you think that it should have closed by now? Right. And leaders do that to their salespeople too. In fact, there was one time we were supporting, it was a company that sold a SaaS where you had to take out the software that they had and replace it with this new software. So it was a complex sale. It was multiple decision makers had to be involved in the decision-making process. And we were brought in to get the meetings, and we were getting the meetings, and there was interest. But the CEO had quarterly targets and an empty pipeline, and he needed to report to his board. So he told his salespeople, don't work on any leads in progress unless you're sure it'll close this quarter. And it was a 2-year sales cycle. So here we were feeding them these amazing meetings with prospects who were interested. And then the salespeople were told by the CEO not to work on them if they wouldn't close that quarter. So they're with an empty pipeline and nothing to work on, and not working on the leads that are in progress. That's a leadership issue.
Absolutely. Let me go back a little and request you to talk about targeting, because targeting seems to be the cornerstone of this whole process, right? What is the best way of doing that, and how are we doing it wrong?
So the best way of doing that, when we lead our clients through the beginning part of the door opener service, 2 weeks is spent on that strategy. There's 2 2-hour messaging calls that start out with a targeting strategy discussion. Because of all the different places you could fish, certain places are going to deliver certain sooner than others, kind of what I was talking about before. Identifying that is key. In my experience in owning this company for 24 years, not every great door opener is crackerjack at that part of the strategy, which is why we have certain door openers who we put through a training program that we developed ourselves from a strategy perspective to be able to lead our clients through that strategy discussion. Because certain things that our clients will say will piece these things together. We also interview our clients' most recent representative A-level client, and we ask them, why did they say yes? what was going on for them at the time that they felt they had to go outside their sphere and find a different solution. And we often find patterns and commonalities there that we can use for targeting, messaging too, but targeting first. So there is a methodology there. We call this moment of yes. It's a trademarked methodology of putting this together that we will lead our clients through, that most sales managers are unaware of. Many people, and this is a blind spot too, many people will think that marketing messaging and sales messaging is the same thing. So they'll use an elevator pitch, or they'll use a USP. Well, those are marketing terms, really. It's not sales language. It's not meant for an individual. It's meant for lots of people. And it just doesn't work. So you first have to identify who to target. I talked a little bit about the urgency factor before.
Yeah.
One of the ways that we have found to find groups of prospects who are experiencing urgency and therefore will be more motivated to learn about something new, will be more motivated to put it on their calendar sooner rather than later. If they're putting it on their calendar for 3 months from now, how interested are they really? But that doesn't mean they weren't the right prospect. It might mean that the seller didn't say the right things, right? All these things have to work together. But when we think about urgency, I like to suggest that people think about it in terms of an income statement. At the top, you have revenue. What's affecting your prospects' revenue that you can help them with? Because they're motivated to fix that. If there's something going on, a trigger event that's affecting their revenue. I mean, I'll give you an example in just a second. What's affecting their labor pool, their cost of goods sold? What's affecting that you may be able to help with? Think about staffing companies in that regard. There's all sorts of great fodder in there for staffing companies when people are having issues with their labor pool. But how many staffing companies will just say, we do staffing and we have these kinds of clients, versus if you are in this business, you are likely facing these kinds of issues. And we have a particular way that we solve this for clients that's more valuable. Let's have time on the calendar to talk about that. Now you have to fill in that sales messaging with specifics, right? But you get the idea that it's more about them than it is about you. So revenue, what's affecting their cost of goods sold, what's affecting their labor pool, what's affecting their profit, that you can help with your solution, your products will help them to overcome those kinds of trigger events. So here's some examples of trigger events. Anything with legislation, right? We have a client who does commercial flooring and interiors. And in the state where she does business, they had years ago new legislation that every corporate headquarters had to have a mother's room in there. Well, some corporations are going to spend big bucks on that and have recliners and beautiful music and candles and waterfalls and all of that. And they'll spend on that. And other companies are going to have a coat closet and a steel chair. Well, if she targets all of the corporations facing that legislation, that's a lot of waste in there, because not every one of them is going to spend. And she doesn't want to deal with the ones with the coat closet and the steel chair. So how do we put filters on the prospect list of all the companies that have to do this to the companies who will spend time and money? And you can figure what best companies to work who also have a large population of young female executives. How about a woman CEO? How about a woman CFO and CEO? Right. So you just keep going down and you make the world smaller, 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 smaller. And then you have a group of prospects that's experiencing a trigger event who's likely to spend more and find this company to be the obvious solution because she is specializing in transforming these spaces, right? So that's just one example. I could give another example, but let me toss it over to you.
Well, this is great actually, because I think most of the time, the ability to analyze a list of prospects, and they may be your target audience. It's like you rightly said, it's typically this size of company, this geography, this designation. This is what I'm going to go after, right? Startups who are funded, have raised $5 million, have a sales team of 5 people, and has a VP of sales. That's what I'm going after. I'm not doing any further analysis to see. It doesn't take them away from your prospecting list, because one of the things that you mentioned about the 2-year cycle is that we are all looking for instant gratification. So can we sell this quarter, like you mentioned, right? But you have to nurture some of them, because they do fit your profile and they will buy from you if you are providing value, of course. But it will take time, and you need to be in touch. You need to be supplying them with value, with like you said, like reports and case studies and things that are going on, and nominating them for awards. I mean, these are all things that you need to do on a continuous basis for them to remember you the day they decide that we are going to buy it this quarter. Right?
Yes, and before they talk to your competitor who calls them. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, the fact that you have to sell this quarter and can't is a function of what you didn't do right last quarter, the quarter before, and the quarter before that, depending on your sales cycle, right? If you are facing a situation where you're afraid that you won't close this quarter, your pipeline is not as robust as it needs to be. And so what people will do, especially leaders, will do with their salespeople, they'll put all sorts of pressure on them, cut their prices, take deals that they shouldn't take, that are not good for the company, because they didn't do what they should have done last quarter, the quarter before that, and the quarter before that. So at some point you have to start. I've been talking lately about sales effectiveness metrics. I like to call them the Kopp sales effectiveness metrics, and perhaps I will trademark that. One of them is, what percentage of deals, closed deals, are the right deals? Since the pandemic, when I asked that question of people, first of all, many of them haven't even thought about that, and they don't measure it, but they should. The number is low. Why is it low? It goes back to exactly what you're talking about. They didn't have enough deals in the pipeline, so they took the wrong deals. They're not actively pursuing the right prospects, so they just take the prospects that land in their lap. They may have relationships, the sellers or leadership may have relationships with people in the industry, and they'll leverage those relationships, but the deals may not be the right deals. They may never be the right client. But instead of going out and trying to meet people who they can really service well, who represent the kinds of deals they want, that's hard work. That's why people hire us, is to go get those meetings for them. But they don't want to do that, so they don't. And the percentage of deals that are the right deals is low. And that feeds that cycle, because if they're not actively pursuing the right prospects so that they can close the right deals, every quarter is going to be a nightmare for the leadership and for the salespeople, and really for their clients.
Absolutely. In the tech space, where I spend more time looking at, there is something called there are two matrices that typically people look at. One is the net churn and the net dollar retention. So these are the two things, two KPIs basically people look at, which is basically aligned to what you are saying. I have a question. You mentioned that you talked to the latest customer to figure out why they chose this particular client, right? So while you are...
Let me just caveat that. Yes, choosing the client is interesting. I want to know why they said yes to the meeting.
Right. Okay. So my question is that when it's very early days, I don't know whether you work with companies who are very early in the stage, and they may not have a lot of referenceable customers or case studies, but they have something unique and they're sort of putting it out there, which is typically the case with a lot of startups, and not necessarily technology startups who are possibly changing logistics or changing real estate and stuff like that, right? How do you go about doing this targeting? Of course, there is a hypothesis that we are going to be the WeWork, so we are going to rent spaces out to companies who don't want their full-time offices. I'm just saying. So how do you look at prospecting for such companies?
It's the same. Just because they don't have clients doesn't mean that they aren't going to add value in a way that others don't for the right group of prospects. People a lot of times think about, why are we different? It doesn't matter why you're different. That's marketing. In sales, it doesn't matter why you're different. Nobody actually cares why you're different. They only care why you're of more value to them. That's all they want. And it used to be 15 years ago that you could say to somebody, oh, I could save you or your company 10%, and that might get you a meeting. No more. No more. The individual doesn't care about the 10%, because the effort that a decision maker has to go through in order to champion a new idea is not worth that. It's got to be worth something to them personally, make their lives easier, free up time so that they can focus on other things that have them going in their careers where they want to go. It's about the individual. So even in a startup situation, we've represented funded startups, we've represented Fortune 500 companies, but it's really the same. Why is it that the right decision maker would feel urgency around meeting them? If it's a new idea, new concept, they're going to have to educate the decision maker as to why that person should care. Why is this going to make your life easier, better? And this is why this meeting is important to you, to learn about this. We talked about engagement just before we turned the video on and started recording, but that is the key. If you could say something that's so meaningful to that individual will knock 3 people off their calendar and make room for you. But did you say something that was that meaningful? I don't know about you, but I mean, my calendar is completely full. I come in the morning, I look at my calendar and I want to cry. But if somebody has something that is of such value for me in the running of my business, I will knock 3 people off my calendar and make room for them. But that's sales messaging and targeting.
This sounds to be very difficult to do, especially if most of us are selling commodities, right? Which means we have 5 other competitors selling pretty much the same thing. To be able to actually say something meaningful to you, for you to say, this guy is so interesting and he has this so unique perspective. I need to move out 3 of my other meetings and I need to give him time. This must be very difficult. And how do you do that? And how many people can do that was my question, right?
Yeah, so people have said we are a company of unicorns, that's for sure. I'm finding the right door openers who can and will do this job successfully, who are experienced, because we only hire experienced people. As you said before, the tenure of our people being able to speak with a CEO or CFO or CMO, it doesn't even matter what size company, that has to be a match. You can't have an SDR with 2 years of experience calling the CFO of Pepsi and expect to get a meeting, right? So you do have to match those things. And then our messaging strategists, these are the people who really understand the strategy of the approach of door opening. Very few people have that. That job doesn't exist out there across industries. So we take people from our door opener pool. We have a training program specifically for them. And we have a head of programs and a lead strategist who is just crackerjack. Nobody can hold this woman's briefcase when it comes to this, right? So, and she leads that team of people. Companies don't have this. So that's why they hire us, because we do. I've developed this group of unicorns with this methodology that they come to us knowing what to do. We just put it in the framework that helps our clients get these meetings. And then, as I said, there's a warm handoff. So one of these senior level people is actually on the call with our client or our client seller, just to make sure it goes well and that there is a second meeting as a result. And then later on in the sales process, if our clients need us to, we can re-engage the prospects for them if for some reason the prospects go silent. And so we take care of the top of that sales funnel for them. We feed them the exact right meetings, the exact right opportunities, and then our clients' people have much more to do, but it's productive and effective activities. So we stick to our 5 planks of door opening success. If we're off our own targets with a particular client, we're looking, is it the target? Is it the message? Is it the answers for objections? Is it the wrong person? Or what's going on in the activity that we may need to fix or change, so we're able to diagnose and get it back on track, where most people are not, and then they'll just fire their sales team. But then they didn't solve the problem because they still don't know what went wrong. This is all part of our secret sauce. But even people who want to get this right for themselves and develop their own internal, they will bring us on to do the messaging, create the prospect list, have the meeting start to flow. They can see what this process is, and then we'll help them to bring it internally if that's really what they want to do.
What is your success rate in terms of setting meetings? So if you're approaching a pool of, say, 100 prospects, how many meetings would you set?
Well, so let me give you the stats the other way.
Sure.
Right. Well, I mean, there's so many different ways I could say this. So we had one client who came to us with a wish list of 50 prospects. We got her into 48. We would have gotten the other 2. It's just a matter of time, right? As long as the prospects are the right prospects, and we're doing so in that case, the statistics are quite high. In other cases, there's not a finite list. There's a huge list. Right. So we have a bank that we have a couple of banks that we support. One of them has been with us for 2 years. They've been on over 200 meetings with CEOs or CFOs of the exact size companies that they're looking for. The other bank has been with us, I think, for about 4 months. Their target pool is a little larger than the other ones in terms of the size of company. They still are looking for CEO or CFO, and we've gotten them in with 35 so far. So think about it. If you've been in 35 meetings in about 4 months, do you think you could close one if that person was the exact right person who felt urgency around meeting you? And usually when our client closes one, it pays for anything we do for them.
Makes so much sense. This is fantastic. And I'm just saying that if you open a school, I'm applying to come and learn what you do.
Well, I'd be happy to have you as our first student.
Okay. Please pencil me in and let me know when I have to come. I'll come in there, and especially Florida. I would love to come there.
Oh yes,
Okay.
Everybody likes Florida.
Caryn, thank you so much. This was fascinating. We would meet again. We'll talk again, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And I definitely enjoyed it.
Yes, you're a wonderful interviewer, very easy to talk to. So, and you're creating something that's so valuable for other people to hear. And I hope it helps everybody to get in more doors and close more sales. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm sure you'll be sharing the contact information to either learn about how you can do door opening better in your own business or the possibility of outsourcing.
Absolutely. Caryn, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.